Hello and welcome to another spiritual learning video. Today we're going to go over meditation, its history, and what it is today. Meditation started to become really mainstream around the turn of the millennium, but few people are aware of how old and broad this art really is, and how it got developed in different parts of the world. Meditation originated in India a very long time ago. The oldest documented evidence of the practice of meditation are wall arts in the Indian subcontinent from approximately 5,000 to 3,500 BCE, showing people seated in meditative postures with half-closed eyes. The oldest written mention of meditation is from 1500 BCE in the Vedas. That is the time when the Vedas made it to paper, but it must be understood that the Vedas has been memorized and passed down as an oral tradition for centuries, long before they were finally written down. In fact, the Brihad Aranka Upanishad lists nearly 70 generations of meditation gurus and students that existed up to that point. During this ancient time, meditation was a practice for religious people who thought it sought to transcend the limitations of human life, connect with universal forces personified as deities, and union with transcendental reality called a Brahman in the Vedas. The Hindu tradition of meditation includes both yogis meditating in caves as well as the sages of the Vedic culture. It is the oldest meditation tradition on earth, still alive and thriving. It has hundreds of lineages and techniques. Most likely the first meditation technique to be invented or discovered was either mantra meditation or gazing, although we can't be sure. The modern yoga movement, which emphasizes posture and breathing exercise, is an adoption of just one of these hundreds of yogic schools, the Hatha Yoga School. In general, yoga is a wisdom tradition whose core is meditation and spiritual development, not a system of stretches and breathing practices. In the 6th century BCE, Simhara Gautama abandoned his royal life as a prince and set out to obtain enlightenment. In the process, he learned meditation and philosophy from the best yogis he could find in his region. After a while, still dissatisfied from what he learned, he diverged from the tradition and created his own methodology. He achieved the enlightenment he sought and became the Buddha. He then spent the next decades of his life teaching meditation and spiritual awakening to thousands of people. Over the next several centuries, Buddhism spread all over Asia and many different lineages were formed. Nowadays, the Buddhist styles of meditation, Vipassana, Samatha, loving-kindness, and walking meditation are perhaps the most widely practiced forms of meditation in the West. In the same golden century as the Buddha, 3 other religions were born, all with their own approaches to meditation. They are Jainism in India, founded by the Mahavira. Jainism is a very ascetic tradition that places great emphasis on self-purification, self-discipline, contemplation, and non-violence. The Jain meditation techniques involve mantra repetition, gazing, breathing awareness, visualizations, and self-inquiry. Taoism in China, founded by Lao Tzu. Taoism emphasizes union with Tao, or cosmic life nature. You can learn more about the Taoic meditation in many different books. Confucianism in China, founded by Confucius. Confucianism focuses more on morality and community life. Meditation was developed in this tradition centuries later with a focus on self-contemplation and self-improvement. It is called Jing Zhou. These traditions are still alive today, although not as popular outside their home countries as Buddhism and yoga are. The Greek philosophers, partially under the lively influence of sages and yogis of India, developed their own version of meditation. Such cultural influences were enhanced by Alexander the Great's military exploits of India, 327 through 325 BCE, which brought both cultures in touch. Plato and Aristotle, as well as the historian Herodotus, freely admitted the influence of the Orient upon Greek thought. For the Greeks, the Indian sages exemplified the highest virtues of the philosophical life that they themselves sought. The Greeks admired the sages' apparent immunity to pain and discomfort, as well as their disinterest in pleasure, and what the Greeks saw as their contempt of death. Greek philosophers practiced navel gazing as an aid to philosophical contemplation. Later on, philosophers developed meditation techniques especially involving concentration. The influence of Eastern thought and contemplative traditions on the West was cut once Christianity began to dominate Europe. It was only in the 20th century that the dialogue East-West began to flourish again. Christian mystics developed their own form of meditation, mostly based on repetition of a religious word or phrase and the silent contemplation of God. One form of Christian meditation is called Jesus' Prayer, which was developed between the 10th and 14th centuries in Greece. Historians speculate that this group of Christians might have had contact with the Sufis and the Indians, which is where the influence of meditation might have come from. Further development of Christian meditation happened by the work of Benedictine monks and Trappist monks. Zen is a popular school of Buddhism founded by the Indian Persian monk Badarama, who in the 8th century traveled to China to teach meditation. From that point, his teachings developed into the lineage of Chan in China, being later exported into Korean Sisan, Japan Zen, and Vietnam Thien. All of these are known collectively as Zen. In all of these lineages, there is a strong influence of Taoism and Chinese culture, which particularly explains the uniqueness of Zen in relationship to other Buddhist traditions. The tradition of Sufis, the mystics of Islam, goes as far back as 1,400 years. Sufism, under some influences of Indian contemplative traditions, developed meditation practices based on breathing, mantra, and gazing. The core of their practices is connecting with God, Allah. They also developed their iconic Sufi whirling, which can be seen in Turkey even today. The Jewish Esoteric traditions of Kabbalah, especially under the influence of Abraham Afadafa, 1240 through 1291, and some later contemplatives, also developed its own form of meditation. These are mostly based on the deep contemplations of philosophical principles, names of God, symbols, prayers, and the tree of life. In the 1700s, several of the Eastern texts of philosophy began to be translated into European languages. By the 18th century, the study of Buddhism in the West was a topic for intellectuals. In the U.S., major figures of the Transcendentalist movement were also admirers of the ideals of Eastern philosophy and spirituality. Yoga and meditation were introduced to the United States early in the 20th century by a yogi. His charismatic and rationalist presentation at the Parliament of Regents in Chicago in 1893 triggered a big interest in Americans in Eastern philosophy and spirituality. It was also well received by the Transcendentalist movement in the United States, especially by Ralph and Henry. As a result of his influence in the 20th century, several famous Indian spiritual teachers migrated to the U.S. Likewise, representatives of several schools of Buddhism made their way to teach in the West. Most of these Eastern masters started teaching the practice of meditation in a more westernized way, often simplified and decoupled from its spiritual context. Scientific studies began to emerge, and people realized that meditation is not only for those who are seeking spiritual enlightenment. According to the scholar George Ferenstein, the first piece of scientific research on meditation happened in 1936, and the first one using the EEG was in 1955. The first collection of scientific studies on meditation was made in 1977 by James Funderbuck, a student of the Swami Rama of the Himalayan International School of Yoga Science. In fact, Swami Rama was one of the first yogists to be studied by Western scientists. In the 1960s, he demonstrated to scientists his ability to voluntarily control his bodily processes, such as heartbeat, blood pressure, and body temperature, which science had up until then considered being involuntary. He demonstrated many other things too, and these other demonstrations triggered interest in the scientific community to further study the effects of meditation in the body. As a result, over the next 5 decades, the number of scientific studies on meditation increased considerably, and so did their quality. Now, in the early 21st century, meditation has become mainstream and greatly secularized. Even though meditation continues to exist, it is the secular approach to the practice for its benefits to the body, mind, and wellness, which is the reason for its ever-increasing popularity. Where to go from here? Look up the step-by-step guides on the different techniques and traditions of the art of meditation. See which one works for you. Thank you so much for joining us on another spiritual learning video. If you're enjoying this content, please check out our spiritual learning playlist for more. We'll see you again soon.